Hello, welcome
Hi.
to the ProDrive IT How to Keep Your Staff Happy When Remote Working webinar. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Anders. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good. For all the attendees we have in the room today, my name's Anders. I'm from Network My Club. I'll be hosting today's event with Chris. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I think from the outside in, especially, it's been admirable. Really looking at the way that you've really pivoted and looked after your current staff, but also onboarded a number of new starters as well, which I'm sure we'll go into. Yeah, Chris, first of all, not a question I don't think anyone would have thought they'd ever be asking or had to answer a year ago, but what were and what are the biggest challenges really with keeping your staff engaged during a global pandemic?
No, it did introduce some new challenges, didn't it, that we weren't expecting. Um, I think the biggest challenge for me is making sure I know how my staff are doing. We run an IT help desk, and it can be stressful. We only tend to speak to people who've got issues with their IT. They don't often phone up to say everything's working okay. And sometimes people can be frustrated, and we can be under pressure to fix problems. So it can be stressful at the best of times. And then when you're isolated, you're at home, you haven't got your team around you. So what worried me the most, I guess, at the beginning was how I would know whether people were okay, whether they were getting overwhelmed, they needed a bit of a hand, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point about how the fact that if everyone's getting really negative feedback all the time, how are you can make sure that they're motivated? So that leads me quite nicely into my next question. So how were you sort of engaging your staff from the early days when this was all new? There was no guidebook or any sort of instructions about how to do so. So what are the different ways that you were doing so?
Um, I think we were slightly lucky in that it was all hands to the pump right at the beginning to get our clients so they could continue to work. None of our clients had a plan for 100% of their people working remotely. So we had to help them get to that really, really quickly. Pressure was on. I mean, everybody just kind of rolled their sleeves up and got on with it. So at the very beginning, I think we were engaged and motivated just because of that. And it was very clear to see the importance that our job was having on other businesses. As that faded away a little bit, we just sort of we thought that the best thing to do was over communicate. And we had at the beginning we had daily company meetings. So before this all happened, we used to have a weekly company meeting, and we then changed that to having daily ones. And things were changing so quickly, and we were reacting, that we thought it was important that there was no confusion about how we saw things and what our plans were over the next few weeks or months, and what was happening to our clients as well, how they were being affected. So I think just by making sure everybody knew what was going on in that regard, that helped an awful lot.
Absolutely. Are you sort of going to continue using the techniques and methods of sort of engaging your staff online going forward? Is this going to be something that you'll be using throughout and yeah, going forward for the business now?
Yeah, I think so. I think certainly for us, I don't see a future where everybody has to be in the office 100% of the time. I think this has really opened everybody's eyes to you can be just as productive working at home as in the office. So I think we're going to have to keep a lot of the things going. It caused us to focus a lot more on employee engagement. We thought we were doing a good job before, and we thought we were putting a lot of effort in, but we increased that quite dramatically, and I wouldn't want to let that go to slip back. And it does feel like we have a more engaged workforce, and people more interested in what's going on in the business. So I think it would be a negative thing for the company as a whole if that slipped back. But sure, we are going to have to change it. We stopped doing those daily meetings quite some time ago. We now have two a week. We may change the frequency and how they're done and that kind of thing. But I think we've learned a lot, we've improved a lot, and we want to keep that impetus going.
Absolutely. You mentioned there about the frequency of meetings and you sort of reduced that a little bit as it's gone on. What are a couple of other ways that you are engaging staff and you continue to engage staff as this sort of goes on?
Yeah. Okay. So everyone at ProDrive is kind of likes being together. We like it's a team that we all like interacting with, and so in trying to introduce fun was a big thing. Um,
Hmm.
And especially in meetings, if you want people to get engaged in meetings, it's a lot easier if they want to be there and they're having a little bit of fun than if everyone's just sitting there bored with their videos off and stuff. So that was a big thing. We have, and we still have, every day we have like a 30-minute meeting in everyone's calendar at 3 o'clock, where we can just chat. We call it banter session, and it's just an opportunity to talk to people, not necessarily about work, but it often is about work, and those kind of conversations that would naturally happen in the office. We have on a Friday afternoon, we have beer o'clock where we all stop working. We have a quiz or a game or some kind of entertainment going on. And again, a chat to try and keep that team bonding going on. And we use, there's an awful lot out there, but we use a particular kind of web service to try and track our employees' engagement, called Office 5. And I think that's really useful to know how you're doing and whether the things that you're doing are making an impact. And we review that every day. It's part of the leadership team's KPIs, the number that gives us. And so that allows us to focus as the different areas change, where people are feeling, more happy or less, then it allows us to focus what we're doing on that.
A few great ideas there. You're giving away all your secrets here.
not really secrets, but yeah, it's and there's loads of other things that we haven't mentioned, obviously, but I think they're the important ones.
No, absolutely. Moving on, Chris, I know you had many new starters during this time, which is obviously fantastic for the business, but how did you go about onboarding them without being able to say hello to them face to face? And how did that process sort of evolve? And how are you going to use that sort of going forward?
Yes, we did have a lot of starters. It was challenging. I think we recognised that it was going to be different, and it had the potential to go really badly. And so before anybody started, we put quite a lot of effort into updating and overhauling our onboarding process. And we actually had sort of two tranches of recruits coming in. One that was, I think it was in about November time when lockdown had been lifted and we could have people in the office. And then we had at the end of December when lockdown was implemented again. So we had the two different ones. And for the first lot, we got people in for a couple of days a week, kind of staggered, so that they could meet people, whoever was in the office, which wasn't many, but mainly their line manager. And we would do the sort of the face-to-face training and that kind of thing then, and then set them tasks for the next day for when they went home, which was normally more online training or reading guides or whatever. And we were very, very clear about what we expected them or wanted them to do and to achieve. So it was a process that they could look at and see where they were on that process. So by the end of week whatever, they would know the kind of tasks that they might be doing if they'd achieved all of the things leading up to them. And I think that clarity really helped. We did find it harder then when we couldn't have anybody in the office and it was all done remotely. And it was quite noticeable for those guys that they took a little bit longer to get up to speed and to get comfortable with the team and that kind of thing. So it definitely increased the challenges and having no contact at all.
Yeah, you mentioned there about sort of them getting to know the team, and when you can't have that sort of afternoon out the office or a time in the office, in fact. And I know you mentioned the banter sessions. So was there any sort of ways that you got them on board with their sort of staff members or their people with other employees within the company?
Yes, we tried to bring them into what we were doing kind of already on the social side. So we invited them actually to join the beer o'clock sessions before they started working for us, so that they at least had met everybody in a more informal way. A couple of them won at the quiz, which was a bit of a worrying side. So we did that, and we just introduced them and made sure that in all the meetings we were almost like overly welcoming, telling everybody who they were and that kind of thing to ease their progression into the team. But we didn't do anything outside of the normal things that we were doing. We just tried to make it a bit easier for them to join in.
No, it's all good ideas. Moving on to sort of your current staff and productivity, I suppose. What are the sort of different ways that you make sure that your staff are working when you can't go over or you can't see what they're doing directly? How are you making sure that they are staying productive? And I'm not suggesting that you have cameras pointing down at your keyboard or anything like that, but how do you sort of make sure that they are productive?
Yeah, well, it was a big worry for us at first. I think it is for everybody. Because of the work we do, we have to have people there available to pick up the phone. And so we have to know that we have a certain number of people that are available to do that, and what have you. So it is difficult. Trust was a big part of it. You know, we trusted that our staff wanted to work hard for us and were going to, and that they would be available. We use Teams. We have sort of Teams etiquette where people say if they're going to step away from their desk and so they're not available. Again, that was necessary because of the phone calls. And I think that's a slightly sort of gentle way of doing it, that you just have to announce that you're not there. In regards to performance, we completely overhauled our KPIs. Took longer than I wanted it to, and I think had we done it earlier, we would have seen the benefits earlier. But we changed them to be much clearer to the team, so they knew what we expected. They knew what good looked like, and they're available to them. We've got them in Power BI. They can go in and look at them at any time, and it's quite real figures. You know, they're not over. It's not a big overview on something that they can't impact. It's very specific things of behavioural stuff about their work, and I think that helped a lot. That they were able to really feel themselves, even without us telling them. They knew when they were doing a good job, and they knew what was expected of them.
No, really good ideas. And moving on to like a sort of mental health side of things in terms of your staff, how do you keep your finger on the pulse to how they're feeling inside and how they're feeling mentally? It's been draining for a lot of people. So how are you sort of doing that?
Yeah, it has definitely. I think part of that's dealt with by the sort of the regular social meetings we have and catch ups and things like that. That hopefully you'll see something or pick up on something says, or even that they're not in any of the meetings. That can be a warning sign as well. I mentioned that we use Office Vibe, and that's a good anonymous way for people to report anything at all. And not just the survey questions that we give them, but if they've got any concerns or they just want to say something, they can do that. We've organised some training and some help. One of our charities is Oakleaf, which is a mental health charity in Guildford. They've done some talks with us in the past about managing stress. I think we've got another one booked for next week, which is open to everybody, actually, not just ProDrive staff, but just things to help recognise in yourself and in other people signs of stress, and markers that people might be struggling, and then trying to step in and help at that point.
No, that's a really good idea. As you could say, it's called Office 5.
Office Vibe.
Office Vibe. Okay, cool, great. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And how do you sort of ensure that everyone stays motivated? I think it's quite easy. Maybe linking back to that point about mental health, it's easy to hide, I think, more online. So how do you ensure that they are kept motivated? I think improving your KPIs is a really good idea, but is there any other sort of ways that you are making sure they are staying motivated?
I think it's the whole package of stuff that we're doing, if you like. As you said, there's also, we do, again, I like to keep things fun if we can. So there's like little spot prizes for people doing particularly well, so that they know they get recognition. And if somebody does something exceptional, there's a chance. It won't always happen. They don't rely on it, but there's a chance that they'll get a nice crate of beer in the post the next day, or a cookery lesson or something like that. You mentioned the KPIs, and that helps an awful lot. And I said earlier about over communicating what the company does, and we've kept that on. We probably over communicate anyway. It might be the right amount, but we make sure that they know what we're trying to do, where they fit in. And we're very open with how the company's doing, what the performance is, what a new client would look like, those kind of things. And so I think if they feel part of a team and they understand where it's going, and they feel they have an input and some kind of voice within that in the decision-making process, then that really helps.
I suppose it's just about being more inclusive and almost having a sort of, your team is more of a community than anything. So if anyone does have any concerns, that your doors are always open to speak to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
All sounds really, really, really positive. Moving on to my final question. So if anyone does have any questions for Chris, please do put them in the chat box. But moving on to my final question, do you have a sort of one top tip, or maybe two or three top tips, which you haven't already given away, that you can share with the audience?
Not that I haven't already given away. I haven't held anything back. I probably should have done. Um, I think I think the top tip is it sounds a bit corny. I think it's really care about how they are. It becomes very obvious if you don't care, and it's just it's like a box ticking exercise or it's something like that. What we saw is that having a motivated team makes the company better. All your profitability goes up, productivity goes up, all that kind of thing. So from a business point of view, it's a really good thing to do. From a kind of I don't know, a personal ethical type of thing, it's you want the people working with you to be happy, and if you really care about it, you'll put the effort in to find out these extra things that you can do to make them happy or to react in the right way when they do have a problem. And it kind of encompasses an awful lot of things, but for me, I think that was a big thing, whereas a few years ago perhaps we didn't care quite as much, and I think the more you care, the more effort you put in, and that's obvious to everybody.
Absolutely. I think the more maybe a business shows that they care about you, it sort of works both ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
We just had a question come into the chat box. So, what do you use to announce to a team that you're going to step away from your desk for a moment? So, is there a particular method that you use to do so?
Yeah, so we, as I said, we use Teams, and we have a couple of group chats. We have sort of one for the department you're in and one for everybody. And being that most of us are techies, they use acronyms for everything we do in IT, right? An acronym for everything. So there's AFK for away from keyboard, BRB, be right back, just things like that. And it's normally just I'll be away for 10 minutes. And then you just say when you've come back, or you forget when you come back, and then you say it 20 minutes later or something. But yeah, just a little phrase that goes out that people understand.
Well, that's a really good idea. Is there any other sort of Teams event, Teams etiquette that you can give away?
If it's something, it's silly, but there's a way that you can mark the messages as important or whatever. And if it is important, make sure you mark it as important, and then respond. So what we got at the beginning was somebody would send out a message, and there's like tumbleweed coming back. And it gets quite disheartening, and you think, oh, everybody's ignoring me, and I'm here by myself, and no one wants to speak to me. So it's just respond to messages that come up, and that can just be one of the kind of like the thumbs up or the little heart symbol or something, or it can be an actual response or whatever. But yeah, if somebody puts something there, it's good to reply in some way for somebody in the team, and we try and limit the GIFs a little bit, otherwise it could just end up being this massive text spiel of jokes and stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's from personal experience as well. I think it's just sort of think about it from the point of view is that if someone was speaking to you in person, you wouldn't ignore them, so don't ignore their message on Teams, sort of thing. Yeah, Chris, I think that's all the questions from me, really. So is there anything else you wanted to talk through or you wanted to mention while we have everyone here?
One thing that the thing that we've done the most recently out of all of this was the KPIs. So we did the sort of the if you like, the fluffy stuff first. And then looked into the KPIs, and I wonder now whether we did that the wrong way round, and should have focused on the KPIs first. I know some of our clients were 100% against working from home in the past, because it's a conversation we have with all of our clients, because obviously the IT can facilitate that. And after the lockdown happened, they were very worried. They reviewed their KPIs, and they actually, some of them came back and said, we're more productive than we've ever been. And they put it down to changing the KPI. So I think that's really important. If I was to do it all again, I think I'd probably prioritise that a little bit higher.
No, it sounds like a really positive thing to do, to know exactly what you need to do to see the company progress as well, and having that clear vision. Yeah. And I suppose those KPIs will also link into sort of the company mission and the company performance overall as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We align them all the way through, from individual to department to company. So they're all building towards what we want to achieve with the company. So it's quite easy to see where your part in all of that is.
No, that's really, really, really important. One more question just come in, Chris.
Yeah.
How can managers sort of help on the mental health side? I know you mentioned about the office vibe as well, but is there anything else that they can be doing to really look out for maybe signs that someone's struggling a little bit, or is there a way of approaching it when they do see that?
I think there is. Training is probably the best answer to that. I did a mental health first aider course. It was just after lockdown. That's right, because it was delayed a few times as all of this kicked in. And for me, that made a massive difference to my confidence when dealing with somebody that was struggling, but also I think my reaction to it. There's all sorts of courses you can do. Oakleaf, who I mentioned earlier, do them. You can do half-day ones or 2 days or whatever. I think it should be like physical first aiders, and you should have one in a company, one person in the company that's done these courses. I'm no expert. I wouldn't like to tell people what to do to look out for the problems, but I think that's the way to address it.
No, I agree, completely agree. Yeah, I think that's it really, Chris. So it's been really, really interesting talking to you. I think these are tips so that everyone can use in their business, no matter what they do. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. And yeah, thanks, Chris.
No problem. Thank you, Anders, and thank you everyone for attending.
Cheers. Thank you.